Level 1. The Sketchbook. You're 22 years old, sharing a thin-walled apartment with two roommates you barely see. Every spare hour, you're bent over a sketchbook, filling page after page with strangers' faces, hands you don't want to forget, light falling through your window at exactly the wrong angle to paint, but the only angle you have. You dropped out of community college halfway through a business degree. Your mother still doesn't fully understand, because the only class that ever felt like breathing was the drawing elective you almost didn't take. You sell what you can from a folding table outside the Tuesday farmer's market, $5 a sketch, $10 if someone haggles you up. Most people walk past without looking twice. The ones who stop, even for a second, make the whole week feel worth it. An older woman once bought 3 portraits in one afternoon and told you your work reminded her of someone real, and you thought about that sentence for a week. You tell yourself, this is just the beginning. That talent like yours doesn't stay invisible forever. At night, you scroll through pages of famous painters, studying how light bends across a canvas in ways you're still learning to fake with your own hands, comparing your unfinished pieces to masterpieces until the gap feels unbearable. You call your mother sometimes, and she asks gently when you're going to get a real job, and you say soon, meaning it a little less each time. You don't have gallery walls, you don't have a dealer, you don't even have a website that works properly. What you have is a battered easel, a coffee can full of brushes, rent due in 6 days, and a stubborn belief that one day the right person will finally see what you're capable of. You keep a running list, taped inside your sketchbook cover, of galleries you'll walk into someday without feeling like an intruder. Some nights you eat cereal for dinner, standing at the counter, still thinking about a shadow you couldn't quite get right that afternoon. Your mother sends you $50 sometimes, folded inside a birthday card, with a note that says, "Buy paint, not rent," as if she already suspects which one you'll choose. You choose paint almost every time, because paint is the only thing that's ever made the noise in your head go quiet. Level 2. The Commission. Word starts to spread, slowly, the way it does in small circles. Someone wants a portrait of their late grandmother from a blurry photograph. Someone else needs a damaged family painting made whole again, a torn corner, a water stain eating through 100 years of varnish and paint. You say yes to everything, because yes is what pays rent, and because every new client feels like proof you're finally becoming what you always said you'd be. The restoration job scares you at first, filling in a stranger's brushstrokes so seamlessly that no one can tell where the original ends and your hand begins. But you're good at it, better than you expected, better maybe than you're comfortable admitting out loud. The client cries when she sees her mother's portrait whole again, running her fingers just above the surface like she's afraid to touch it. She pays you in cash, slips in an extra $50, and calls you a miracle worker on her way out the door. Referrals start coming from people you've never met, each one a little more specific about what they want fixed, filled in, or quietly improved. You buy real materials for the first time, proper oils instead of the student grade paint you've used for years, and it feels like a promotion you gave yourself. That night, you sit with the money spread across your kitchen table, counting it twice even though the number doesn't change, and something in you notices how easily your own hand disappeared inside someone else's work, and how good it felt, uncomfortably good, to be paid for exactly that. You start keeping 2 separate notebooks now, one for your own ideas, half empty, and one for client requests, filling up fast. Your mother notices you seem lighter on the phone these days and asks if you finally found something steady, and you say something like that, technically not a lie. A friend from art school stops by, sees the restoration work drying on your table, and jokes that you've basically become a forger, laughing like it's obviously not a real category to worry about. You laugh too, a beat too long, and change the subject before either of you can think about it any further. Level 3. The Copy. A regular customer asks for something different this time, an exact copy of a well-known painting. Just for the wall, he says. Nothing fancy, nothing anyone would take seriously. You paint it carefully over 3 long nights, matching the palette, the exact fall of shadow across the fruit bowl in the original, proud of how close you get the light. He's thrilled when he picks it up, turning it in the doorway light, and asks almost casually if you can make it look older, cracked a little at the edges, the way real oil paint splits after a century of hanging in someone's home. You tell yourself it's just a technical challenge, a puzzle for your hands to solve, nothing more sinister than that. You experiment with varnish and gentle heat until fine lines appear across the surface on their own, and it works better than you imagined, better than you're entirely proud of. He sells it at a weekend antique market as a possible period piece. No promises made out loud, just a knowing shrug whenever a buyer starts asking questions he doesn't want to answer. You tell yourself you only painted a picture, that whatever happens after it leaves your studio isn't yours to carry. That intention is the only thing that matters. The next order comes in within a week, more specific this time, and it pays 3 times what the last one did. You stop asking where these paintings end up because some part of you has already guessed and doesn't want the guess confirmed. Your client introduces you to a friend of his, a soft-spoken man who deals in estate sales and antique furniture, who looks at your craquelure technique for a long moment before asking, quietly, if you'd be interested in more consistent work. You say you'll think about it, even though some part of you has already said yes. That night, you look up the legal difference between a copy, a reproduction, and a forgery, and close the browser tab before you finish reading, telling yourself it's not information you need yet. You buy a better easel with the extra money, the kind you use to only admire through a shop window, and it feels like a small, private celebration you can't quite explain to anyone. Level 4. The signature. The requests keep getting more specific and harder to explain away as harmless. This time he wants a name added in the corner, a minor but real artist from the last century, someone whose signature you've practiced from old auction catalogs until your hand moves without thinking about it. You tell yourself it's still just a copy, a study, a tribute, the kind of thing painters have quietly done for centuries, without anyone calling it a crime. The money is enough now to cover rent alone, without roommates, in an apartment with actual north-facing light, which feels less like a red flag and more like arriving somewhere you always deserved to be. Your partner starts noticing the odd hours, the cash that appears with no invoice attached, the way you angle your laptop away from her when she walks into the room. She asks more than once what you're really working on lately, and you give her half an answer, technically true, carefully incomplete, and she can tell, even if she doesn't say so yet. She doesn't push, not yet, but something between you goes quiet in a way it never used to, a small distance that wasn't there a year ago. You paint later into the night now, partly for the money, partly so you don't have to sit across from her at dinner and explain something you haven't fully explained to yourself. Some nights you almost tell her everything, and then the moment passes, and you let it. The dealer friend starts calling more often, always with a new name, a new decade, a new story about where a piece supposedly came from before it reaches your studio. You keep a private file now, notes on brushwork and pigment habits of half a dozen painters you've never met and never will, studying them the way actors study accents. Your mother asks when she'll finally get to see your studio, and you tell her it's not ready yet, a lie that's easier to say than the truth would be. You start avoiding family dinners on weekends that used to be non-negotiable, telling yourself you're just busy. That busy is a normal thing for a working artist to be. Level 5. The studio. Business is bigger now than one pair of hands can manage alone, so you hire help, 2 young painters fresh out of art school, hungry and skilled and grateful for any steady work in a field that rarely offers it. You teach them your methods, the aging techniques, the way to weight a brushstroke so it reads as older than it actually is, presenting it as craft rather than what it's slowly become. Everything that leaves the studio goes out under your name and your growing reputation. Even the pieces you never personally touched, and you've stopped correcting people when they call you the artist. A dealer starts placing your work with private collectors who don't ask too many questions, moving pieces through channels you don't fully understand and have decided it's safer not to ask about. The money finally stops feeling like survival and starts feeling like proof that you made it, that every hour of doubt back in that first cramped apartment was worth this. Your partner gives you an ultimatum one night, sitting very still at the kitchen table, tired of being lied to about a career she still doesn't understand and no longer trusts. You promise things will change soon, once this next deal closes, once you're finally stable enough to breathe without needing the next commission. You believe yourself when you say it, mostly. The way people believe things they've already decided not to examine too closely. The two apprentices you hired start asking harder questions, quietly, in the break room, about where exactly their pieces end up once they leave the studio. You give them the same half answers you once gave your partner, and watch one of them decide, visibly, to stop asking. Your studio rent triples when you move into a bigger space downtown, all windows and polished concrete, the kind of address that makes clients trust you before you've said a single word. Your mother visits once, finally, and stands very still in the doorway, looking at paintings she doesn't fully understand are worth more than the house she raised you in, and says only that she's proud, in a voice that doesn't quite match the words. Level 6. The Empire. Your name means something now, whispered with a kind of respect in rooms you used to only read about in magazines. The dealer arranges something bigger this time, a piece attributed to a painter who died decades ago, complete with a provenance story and old paperwork that traces back further than anyone at the auction house seems willing to check. It sells for more money than you earned in your first 5 years combined, and you watch the final number climb on a screen from the back of a room you weren't technically invited into. There are gallery openings now, your own studio with skylights you once only dreamed about, your face in a local arts magazine describing you as a rare talent, with an eye for the old masters. Collectors shake your hand like you're the discovery of the decade, and you've gotten good at smiling through the compliments without flinching. Your partner has mostly stopped asking questions, and somewhere in that long silence, you've lost the version of her that used to believe in you without complication, back when believing in you didn't require looking away from anything. You hear a rumor at one opening, passed between two collectors who don't notice you standing close enough to hear, about a new lab technique that can date the exact age of paint down to the decade. For the first time in years, you feel something colder than guilt settle quietly behind your ribs, and it doesn't leave for the rest of the night. You start avoiding certain collectors at events, the sharper ones, the ones who ask specific questions about pigment and canvas age, instead of simply admiring the brushwork. Your dealer laughs off your worry over the phone, telling you labs are slow, expensive, and rarely used unless someone with real money has a real reason to ask. You buy your mother a house that same month in cash and tell her it's from a good year, technically true, carefully incomplete, the same kind of sentence you used to hear yourself say. At the next opening, a young journalist asks where you find pieces this rare, and you give an answer so smooth it frightens you a little, on the drive home, alone. Your partner watches the interview clip later online, silently, from the other side of the couch, and says nothing about it for 3 days. You start sleeping with your phone face down on the nightstand, unwilling to see who might be calling this late, or why. Level 7. The Fall. The call comes on an ordinary Tuesday, a museum curator requesting to test the piece attributed to the dead master, calling it standard procedure before a planned exhibition, Nothing personal, just paperwork. You know exactly what the test will find, and there is nowhere left to redirect that certainty. Within weeks, the story unravels in public, your name printed beside words like fraud and forgery, in articles you can't stop reading, no matter how many times you tell yourself to close the tab. The dealer disappears with whatever money is left, unreachable within days, as if he'd been quietly planning his exit longer than you had. The collectors demand refunds. The gallery that once celebrated you quietly takes your name off its website, and the young painters you trained scatter to other studios that suddenly can't remember hiring anyone connected to you. Your partner packs slowly, methodically, without shouting, folding years of a shared life into boxes with a kind of calm that somehow hurts more than if she had screamed. Legal trouble follows, fines and hearings, and lawyers who bill by the hour you no longer have, stripping away nearly everything you spent a decade building. You end up back in a room not so different from the one you started in, thin walls, second-hand furniture, except now everyone within 100 miles knows exactly who you are and exactly what you did. You sit alone one night with nothing left but a blank canvas propped against the wall, and for the first time in years, you actually pick up a brush for no one but yourself. Your mother calls once, her voice careful, asking if the house is safe to keep, and you tell her yes, even though you genuinely don't know anymore. Reporters call for a while, then stop once a bigger scandal somewhere else takes their attention away from yours. The two young painters you trained send a single group message wishing you well, and then neither of them ever writes again. You spend the worst of those nights replaying every choice that felt small at the time, the copy, the signature, the first cash payment, wondering exactly where the version of you that only wanted to be seen turned into this. An old client from the very beginning, the woman with her mother's restored portrait, sends a short message saying she's sorry and that she still has it hanging in her hallway, unbothered by any of it. You read that message more times than you'd ever admit, holding on to it like the one piece of proof that some of what you made was still, somehow, real. You start again quietly, painting under your own name this time. No signatures but your own. No story attached but the true one. It takes years to build something small and honest, a modest studio with better light than you ever had, a handful of collectors who buy your work because they actually like it, not because of what it's supposed to be worth someday. A small gallery finally shows your original paintings, the ones that were always yours, and for the first time, being known for your work feels like something you can stand inside without flinching. Your partner comes back into your life slowly, cautiously, the way trust returns when it's earned instead of assumed, one ordinary dinner at a time. The fame you have now is smaller than the empire you lost, but it's finally, entirely yours. In another city, in another cramped apartment, someone barely 19 years old just filled the last page of a sketchbook and set it down, wondering if anyone will ever really see what they're capable of.